Just what I always wanted.
Got some audience members. Alright, hello everyone. My name is Tyler. I'm going to be showing you how to work and set up a Panasonic GH4 for its optimal setting for the type of video you're interested in showing. GH4 is a very versatile camera and is one of the better consuming cameras on the market right now. I've been doing work with it for a few years, doing about video work for about 8 years. And although most of my experience is in post-production, I have plenty of skills in shooting and filming videos as well. With that said, every camera is different, whether it's the size of the lens, whether it's the speed or the aperture. So shooting on every camera can be a little tricky. So best thing to do is try and be very versatile on what kind of cameras you use. And I'm just going to be showing you one type of camera. Very popular right now. Popular because of its quality. It's a little bit cheaper than a lot of the more expensive options, and it's very, very consumer friendly. So, with that said, we'll go ahead and get started. And yeah, welcome everyone. I know I've talked to a few of you before this to see y'all's camera knowledge. I know you said that you've used a GoPro before, and one of you also had shot some stuff and done a little work yourself. So hopefully this is something that's kind of familiar to you. But you know, hopefully you'll learn something new. First off, this is the Lumix Panasonic GH4. I got some specs here that I've set up. 17.2 megapixels for taking pictures. At 24 frames per second, it does shoot 4K, and we'll kind of dig into that and talk more about frames per second and 4K later. It's got a live viewfinder, face detection, which can be a little handy, eye tracking. Does have Wi-Fi, can connect to your phone, which is pretty neat as well. Shows all your color temp stuff as far as using what temperature you're shooting at for lighting. Ranges from 2500 from 10K, which is pretty popular. It's usually the range for most cameras. And then also its max ISO is 256,000. We'll also talk a little bit about what that means and what you'll be using that for. So now that I've got that, I'll show you what lens we'll also be using. I'll show you how to attach it in just a second. This is a pretty basic lens, 12 to 35 millimeters. We'll talk a little bit about, later in the presentation, what size of lens, versatility of lenses. This is a pretty basic lens for starters. You know, it's got a zoom function, ranges from 12 to 35 millimeters. Very popular lens for beginners, and that's why I thought I'd bring it today. So first, we'll go ahead and attach the lens. So what you'll do is you'll remove this front cover, remove the back piece, and I like to usually do this quickly so no dust or dirt gets in the lens sensor. You'll line up these red dots, pretty simple. Plug it in, turn, and you're all set. And then I'll leave the lens cover on for right now as well, since we're not going to be using it just yet. So first off, the GH4 is a mirrorless setup. I know most people are familiar with the term DSLR. The difference is that a DSLR stands for digital standard or single lens reflex, and a mirrorless system can use more than one lens. Just as you can see, I was able to attach, detach this however I wanted to, which is very helpful for people that are trying to get a little bit more in depth in the industry. So let's do some advantages and disadvantages of a mirrorless and DSLR. I got the pros up here for both. As you can see, a mirrorless, less exposed to dust, a little bit more closed system, really high resolutions, lighter, smaller, a lot more durable, mainly because it's got less glass. They are cheaper, and it has a live viewfinder system. And that was one of the challenges whenever they were making mirrorless cameras, was to trying to integrate a live viewfinding system. For a long time, DSLRs had a big advantage over these because they couldn't get an electronic viewfinder that was quick enough to show exactly what you're seeing, and now that they've got a little bit more advanced technology, we can do that. Also, it's kind of where the industry is heading. The industry is kind of heading this way because these are more durable, they are lighter, and they are cheaper. My personal thing is I think they're cheaper for now, mainly because they're trying to push the industry in that direction and get people away from those single lens reflex cameras, those DSLRs. But the DSLR does have some pros. Most people are very familiar with it. It has a little bit greater battery life because they've got a little bit bigger body, so they can hold a little bit bigger battery. They're more popular to filmmakers or common picture takers, stuff like that, more widely accepted. A few better accessory choices since they've been around for a little while. And they are a little bit better in low light, and we'll kind of go over why in a little bit as well. So certain specs on this camera. Oh, I'm sorry. I also have some cons to both the mirrorless and DSLR. I was trying to move on there. The autofocus system is a little bit slower than the DSLR, and that's because of that live electronic viewfinder we were talking about earlier. It does take a little bit longer to focus. Number of lenses is somewhat limited right now since the industry is just kind of getting in this way, and also the battery life, we talked about that, is not as good. DSLRs, we also talked about, are a little bit bulkier, quite a bit more expensive since they are that single lens. You know, it's almost like a package deal, so they can be a little bit more expensive that route. Other than that, you may just have to purchase additional accessories to make up for different parts on DSLRs, certain lens attachments or something like that. All right, next, let's talk about 4K. The mirrorless, the Panasonic Lumix GH4 is 4K, and it's one of the only consumer-grade 4K cameras out there. So, what is 4K? I'm sure, as most of you've heard, just about everyone has heard now, 4K is what kind of TVs we got. They're the biggest, newest thing as far as having a 4K TV, this, that. But what it is exactly is it's the amount of pixels that are in one resolution. So for a long time you heard HD, which was 1080. That was a big deal, and those TVs came out as well. But the industry is headed in 4K. Most movies and stuff are shot in that, shot in 4K versus 1080 now, just because the resolution is higher. You can capture stuff with finer detail, which is very important to movie makers. Which is more used right now? It kind of depends on where you're at. 1080 is still very highly used as far as definition TVs. 4K is just pushing that envelope right now. Next, we did talk about lenses earlier, so we'll kind of get a little more depth in that. A good starter lens is like the one I have here. It's going to be a little bit cheaper. It's got a little bit of variety to it, from being a ranging lens from 12 to 35 millimeters. As you can see here, this is 35, all the way extended, and that is 12. So a lot of lenses, as you may have heard whenever hearing people talk about what they've shot on or what kind of movies, aren't going to be these ranging lenses. They'll actually be more single millimeter lenses. And the reason for that is there's less moving parts, and they get a cleaner shot. This is because there isn't moving parts, means there's less glass, and we'll kind of talk when we get into lighting and aperture here very shortly. We'll talk about why having a single millimeter lens has a very big benefit over having a 12 to 35 or 100 to 300 millimeter lens or whatever it may be. So next on the lens options, we have our 4/3 micro lens, which is the attachment that's on here. That's the mount of the lens part of the camera. So the lens attaches the 4/3 micros. Most mirrorless systems use this micro 4/3 system. It's a little more compact, reducing size. The heads-up display on the camera, as you can see here, take this lens off. It's got a wide variety of different lens selections up here and down here As you can see, there's a pretty big variety of different heads-up display options on the camera, and what that does is it shows you everything that you need to know while filming. Alright. Now, let's kind of get into a little bit of basic controls, and then we'll kind of get into the shooting modes here. So basic controls, you're going to have your turn wheel here. With that, you'll be able to scroll through and use everything. So when you click menu, you can scroll down, and you'll be able to go through each option, as you can see here. Get to that. Whenever you scroll through these menu options, you can either use the wheel like this or like this. And each one of these function buttons that you see on the back of the camera actually does explain, or does use a certain function on the camera that you set it to. So it's very versatile whenever you use these function buttons to either attach it to a certain mode you like. You can click it to switch that mode very quickly, or if it's to get to a certain menu screen, you can also do that as well. Now let's get really quick back into the lens choices that we talked about earlier. So first, we did talk about the 12 to 35 millimeter and the 50 millimeter. Now the reason that it can be important to use a 50 millimeter lens that's basic, standard, does not expand like a 12 to 35 millimeter lens, which means it doesn't have that expanding piece that I showed you earlier, is that a 50 millimeter lens, since it has less moving parts and less glass, is able to hold a better aperture. And the aperture pretty much is the size of the hole in the lens. And kind of like our eyes, whenever the hole is bigger, we're trying to take in more light, and whenever the hole is smaller, we're trying to take in less light. Well, for cameras and telescopes and things like that, it's always better for more light to come in, or more color to come in, so should I say. So with these single millimeter lenses, 50 millimeter, and not a 50 to 75, just a 50, it has a better f-stop. So the f-stop is what lets light pass through. So, for example, the GH4 has a 2.8 f-stop, which is pretty good and pretty common with this lens to have that much light let through, since it is a versatile lens and not just a single millimeter lens. Alright, since we've gotten through some basic controls, we'll kind of get to some different shooting modes that we have here. So the two most popular shooting modes on the GH4, since there's something that's kind of new, is the Cinelike D and Cinelike V. As you can see here, the Cinelike D is 4K. It's really popular whenever you're using this camera, since this camera is sold as one of the only 4K consumer cameras. To use Cinelike D, it's great with nighttime, great with low light, because that lens gets really big, it takes in a lot of light, and lets you be able to see really well in low light. The Cinelike V does a little bit better daytime shots with better lit shots, and we will talk about lighting in a little bit as well. I usually prefer Cinelike V because I have lighting set up specific for whatever shot I'm using. Both have contrast, saturation, noise control options that we can tweak all those little things that you want to do in your shots. So the things like, except we talk about 4K a little bit more, is the industry is moving faster and faster every year. Like it says here, 4K is new right now, but soon it could be 5K. I've even seen something shot in 10K. And it's not because the cameras can't do it, it's actually because we have no way to watch them. So without a 10K TV, it's pointless to shoot in 10K. But the thing about shooting with these 4K cameras is that not all post-production allows you to edit in 4K. Whenever I first bought this 4K camera, I have Adobe Premiere on my Mac. Whenever I first bought this camera, I did have a little bit of trouble making sure that I had the right clip settings to be able to use my 4K shots. So sometimes whenever you shoot in 4K, you have to switch it back over to 1080p or 1080i whenever you're in post-production, just so those shots, so you can actually work with them. Next. Here's some more stuff on 4K. Make sure your post-production can handle it. Low light 4K shooting. Most of the GH4 4K features do not have a very high ISO, and ISO is pretty much how much light is let into it. So whenever you're shooting in 4K, you can only shoot at 24 frames per second, which is mostly what everyone watches TV here in America in. In Britain, it's 29.97. The reason is that the cameras, these consumer-grade cameras, haven't been able to really catch up and be able to put as much technology in a smaller, more friendly camera than is with those big cameras you see movie companies using. So the ISO 156 in the 4K feature is not that high if you're trying to shoot something in low light. So it's going to be really noisy, really staticky. Picture's not going to be very clean. So whenever I do shoot something in low light meaning kind of the setting we're in right now, there's no lights directly on my face. The only thing I have are these small string bulbs and the sun coming through these tinted windows. I wouldn't want to use 4K in this setting because it wouldn't be able to pick up that much light. Say I did have certain lights on me right now, then I'd probably use 4K since it's better well lit. A big thing whenever you're shooting to keep in mind is location. Location is everything. So picking a location can be very important in a few different ways. When picking a location, you want to take into account the time of day you're going to be shooting. I've had shots where I've done them during the daytime, and it's taken a very long time to get the exact shot we wanted. Well, the problem is that the sun moves, obviously, across the sky. So some shadows may be coming down this way, some shadows may be coming down that way, and it makes for kind of a continuity error, as you can see here. So one big problem with people shooting amateur films is continuity. They forget maybe where they place something in the scene. You may have seen this in a movie when something was here, and then the next shot was either not there or in a different spot. That's continuity. But continuity on set is just as important as continuity and resolution. So if you're going to be shooting something, you don't want to switch back and forth from 4K to 1080 because you will be able to tell the difference. So if you're going to shoot in low light, try and use 1080 throughout the whole shot for a better ISO. Next. Like I said earlier when we were talking about the sun, it's not always our friend. When shooting outside, make sure and take into account the positioning. Different positioning will cause different shadows and brightness. Okay, so on the camera, we'll kind of run through this quickly. You want to make sure that you listen to what the camera is telling you. This piece of technology is very powerful. It does have a lot of key features that let you know exactly what you'll be using. So as you can see here, I take off this lens. There's going to be zebra stripes going across the lens right here, and that shows that something is too bright for the shot. Or as you can see right here, the autofocus tool. Yep, just like that. The autofocus tool is being in use right there. So what you want to do is use the camera to make sure and tell you exactly what you need to know about the piece of equipment or the shot that you're making. Other things to make sure and use with this camera, which I'll kind of pass it around right now. If you're going to be using a camera, you also want to use a tripod. There's something that's going to be able to hold it still, unless it's specifically supposed to be shaky. You've seen it like in Blair Witch Project and stuff like that. You want to be able to have still clean shots, and even with shots that you're going to be moving on, you may want to use something called like a Steadicam. So Steadicams, they can be very pricey. So if you're going to do one without a Steadicam, and Steadicams are just pretty much frames with springs or bungees on it to hold the camera, you know, like shocks on a truck or something like that, to make sure it stays still while the rest of it is moving. They are expensive, and if you're not going to use one, you want to be sure to try and have something else. I know I'm naturally shaky, but so you might want to try to have something else to keep the camera still instead of your natural hands. Now, some of these things you can fix in post-production, but you never want to rely on post-production to fix your problems. Many times I've said, I'll fix it in post, and it hasn't worked out that way. So, that being said, the most key thing to shooting film, I'll take that from you. The most key thing to shooting film is making sure that whenever you're setting up your shot, you're taking everything into account. Your lighting, you know, what's in the scene, what you're going to be doing in the scene, and you always want to make sure and rewatch footage on the set. That way, if you think you got the best shot, you can at least watch it over and over and over and be sure. And the best thing to do is to shoot again. If one little thing doesn't look right, don't say, it should be fine. Go and redo the scene, because the worst thing you can do is get home and be disappointed with your footage and have to come back and shoot again. So any questions? Open this time up for questioning. No? Alright. Other than that, my kind of closing statements is, as technology continues to improve and move forward, it's always important to remember a few key details that we went over today. Preparation for your shot can either make it or break it, just kind of like we just talked about. The more thought that goes into your pre-production, it better reduces the amount of stress that you'll have, or the amount of problems you'll come across in post-production. Number two, small details may seem irrelevant and a little time consuming when you're shooting, but this is very important, and take everything into consideration. I mean everything. Every little detail can make your shot look different. With these high resolution cameras, everything is seen. So you really have to take in a full account of the view of the camera. The last thing you ever want to have to do, like I said, is reshoot. Let's see. And lastly, have fun. These shoots can get stressful, and I think the best part about doing these types of projects is that it really opens up the creative sectors of your mind. You know, you always run into small issues when shooting, but the fun part is finding creative ways to kind of jump those hurdles. Sometimes they'll be harder than others, and sometimes you'll be kind of surprised at how easy it is to kind of manipulate footage to go your way. I hope everyone has kind of learned something. This was kind of a quick overview of this specific camera and what certain parts of this camera mean. Just a quick demonstration, kind of get you more familiar with cameras in general, especially the GH4. Once again, thank you guys. Have fun out there. Make sure to always aim high when you're shooting. So, thank y'all.